My name is Maya Collins, a 31-year-old pianist turned businesswoman, and on what should have been a night of celebration, everything I thought I knew about trust and success came crashing down. The Westbrook Hotel ballroom was shimmering with opulence, the clinking of glasses and quiet chatter filling the air as guests gathered for Judith's 55th birthday gala. It was supposed to be an evening of joy, a moment of unity after the passing of my father. We had been through so much together, my family and I, and this should have been a simple celebration of life moving forward. I had no idea that Judith, my stepmother, was planning her ambush long before I even stepped into the ballroom. I had just received her invitation last week, and to be honest, I was nervous about going. The tension between us had been brewing ever since my father, Thomas Carter, passed away a year ago. Judith and I had never quite gotten along, but the business, Carter Manufacturing, had always been the real elephant in the room. My father had left me in charge of the company. It was a decision that had made Judith furious, but I had done my best to put aside personal grievances and focus on moving the company forward. As I walked into the ballroom that night, I was hopeful that time had softened Judith's bitterness. I'd even brought her a thoughtful gift, something I had worked hard on for months. I hoped that it might mend some of the broken pieces of our relationship, or at the very least, bring peace. I had no idea I was walking into the very lion's den that Judith had carefully set up. I didn't see it coming. Everything changed when I was halfway across the ballroom, heading to meet some old colleagues. Judith stood by the large cake display with her champagne flute in hand, her lips curling into a triumphant smile as she raised her voice above the crowd. "Return what isn't yours, Venus," she shouted, her words cutting through the room like a knife. I froze, my legs turning to stone as her voice echoed in the air. It was as if the entire room paused, every conversation stopping in mid-sentence. Guests slowly turned their heads, their eyes shifting from Judith to me and back again. My heart pounded in my chest, my palms went clammy, and I could feel my breath catching in my throat. I stood there in complete disbelief, with a glass of champagne in my hand, still clutched like it was some kind of lifeline. "What are you talking about, Judith?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but I was shaking, trying to hold it all together. She continued, "You stole my daughter's birthright. You think my late husband didn't know what he was doing when he left Carter Manufacturing to you? You manipulated him when he was sick, and now you're sitting on a throne that isn't yours to claim." I blinked, unable to process what she was saying. There was a sting in her words, like acid dripping into an open wound. It wasn't just what she said that shocked me, it was the public spectacle she was making. This wasn't a private conversation, a family discussion. No, this was Judith's grand, calculated move to humiliate me in front of Houston's elite business community. I swallowed hard, but my voice was steady when I finally spoke. "That's not what happened, Judith. My father made his wishes clear to me, and I've been running this company the way he would have wanted. Not for power, not for control, but because I love it and I want it to thrive." "You don't deserve it," Judith spat back, her words dripping with contempt. "I should have been the one to run this company, not you, an over-the-hill pianist who hasn't even visited her father in years." Her words stung harder than anything I had expected. Yes, I had been away often. Yes, I had sacrificed time with my father to pursue my career as a pianist, but that didn't mean I didn't care. I loved my father. I loved this company, and he had entrusted it to me because he knew I was capable of running it. But Judith didn't care about that. She cared about one thing: control. Behind her stood Pamela, my stepsister, who had never shown any interest in the business until now. She was smug, her arms crossed in front of her chest, nodding along with everything Judith was saying. "Exactly," Pamela said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You've had your time, Venus. Now it's time to let someone else take the reins." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, and I could feel the eyes of every single person in the room on me. This wasn't just about Judith, it was about everyone. I was being publicly dethroned. I refused to let them see how much this was hurting me. I had worked hard to build a life for myself after my father's passing. I had fought tooth and nail for the company, made difficult decisions, and brought it to new heights. But it was clear they weren't interested in that. To them, I wasn't a leader. I was a daughter who didn't deserve her inheritance. Judith wasn't done, though. You think this company is yours? You think you've earned the respect of the industry? No one here respects you, not like they respect me and Pamela. You're nothing more than a glorified employee who happened to get lucky. It's time for you to step down. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. My heart hammered as I stared at Judith, but I didn't respond to her. Instead, I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the people I had worked so hard to impress. I could see the discomfort on their faces. Some were embarrassed. Others looked guilty. A few glanced away as if they regretted being dragged into this mess. I think it's time for me to leave, I said, my voice clear, firm. I could feel the anger coursing through me, but I didn't let it consume me. I turned to leave the ballroom, my back straight, my head held high. As I walked toward the exit, I heard Judith's voice trailing behind me, but I didn't look back. She shouted, "Don't think this is over, Venus," but I kept walking, feeling the sting of the betrayal burn within me. I sat in my car for a while, parked outside the Westbrook Hotel, feeling the weight of everything that had just happened. The night was supposed to be a celebration, a chance for closure, or at least for reconciliation. But instead, it had turned into the most humiliating experience of my life. My stepmother, Judith, had done everything in her power to disgrace me, to strip me of the hard-earned reputation I had built. I had stood in front of a room full of people, once again being treated as if I were nothing but an intruder. And now, as I sat there alone in my car, the reality of it all began to sink in. But in that moment, I felt something new. Anger. Not the kind of fury that blinds you and makes you act recklessly. No, this was something different. This was the kind of anger that sharpened my focus, that clarified my next move. Judith thought she had won. She thought she had destroyed me. But I knew better. I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had a plan. I reached for my phone and sent a quick text to Bernard Wesley, my father's longtime attorney and the executor of his will. "We need to talk. I have some ideas. Let me know when you're free." A few moments later, my phone buzzed with a reply. "I'm at the office. Come by when you're ready." I turned the key in the ignition and drove toward the office building. I didn't know exactly what I was going to say to Bernard, but I knew I needed to act quickly. Judith's betrayal, her blatant manipulation, had shaken me to my core. But now, it was my turn to take control. When I arrived at Bernard's office, the familiar, quiet comfort of the space instantly put me at ease. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with legal texts and case files, the leather chairs, the polished wood desk. Everything was the same as it had always been. Bernard had been a part of our family for as long as I can remember, a trusted advisor to my father. I needed his wisdom more than ever now. He greeted me warmly, his usual professional demeanor, a reassuring presence in the face of everything that had just happened. "Venus, I'm sorry about what happened tonight, but we both know Judith's not going to let this go quietly. I'm sure she's already scheming for her next move." "I can't believe she'd do this publicly," I replied, the bitterness seeping into my voice. "She contested the will 3 times and lost. Why try again now?" Bernard leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers thoughtfully. "Because she knows that the public perception is everything. You've been left to handle things with dignity, and she's trying to make you look like you don't belong there. She's trying to turn the business community against you." I nodded, taking in what Bernard was saying. "I'm not going to let her get away with it. I have proof, Bernard, proof that she's been undermining me for months. If I can't keep her from taking control of the company, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth. They need to see what she's done." Bernard's eyes sparkled with interest. "You're thinking about going public with this. I nodded, feeling the fire inside me grow. Exactly. It's not just about Carter Manufacturing anymore. It's about my father's legacy. It's about proving that I'm the rightful CEO. I'm not going to sit quietly while Judith and Pamela try to steal everything from me. They want to make me look like a thief? Let's show them who the real thief is. That night, I went home and sat down at my desk. I had a lot to do, and the time was quickly running out. I opened the folder I had meticulously prepared months ago, a collection of documents and records that proved my legitimacy. There were emails from my father detailing his decision to leave the company to me, financial records showing how I had grown the company after his passing, and testimony from employees who had worked under me for the past year. I also had the video of my father explaining his wishes, something he had recorded just 3 months before his passing. He had been weak physically, but his mind was as sharp as anything. He had made it clear that he wanted me to lead Carter Manufacturing, and I wasn't going to let Judith tear that away from me. I spent the next few hours compiling everything into a cohesive presentation. I knew what had to be done. I needed to remind everyone in that room who I was, who I had become. This wasn't just about a company or a legacy. It was about my father's wishes, my integrity, and my future. The next morning, I drove to Bernard's office. He was ready. We reviewed the documents again, and everything was in place. I felt the anxiety start to fade away, replaced by a quiet sense of determination. Judith might think she could destroy me, but she was about to find out just how wrong she was. "Let's do this," I said, standing up from the desk. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. I'm not going to let her win." By the time the gala started that evening, I had everything I needed. I wasn't just going to let Judith manipulate the situation. No, I had one final card to play, and I was going to play it perfectly. I arrived at the Westbrook Hotel with a sense of calm that surprised even me. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was focused. I had proof, and now it was time to use it. As I walked into the ballroom, I could feel eyes on me. The guests were still buzzing with the same energy from the night before, but this time they were watching me, waiting for what I was going to do. I walked to the front of the room where Judith and Pamela were standing. Judith's face was flushed with indignation as she turned to see me, her mouth already opening to say something. But before she could speak, I raised my hand and addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," my voice steady and clear, "tonight I stand before you not just as Thomas Carter's daughter, but as the CEO of Carter Manufacturing." The gala was already in full swing by the time I walked into the Westbrook Hotel ballroom. The ambient chatter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft hum of live music filled the air, but none of it reached me. My mind was focused solely on what was about to happen. I had spent hours preparing, gathering the evidence, organizing the documents. Tonight wasn't about enjoying the celebration. Tonight was about taking control and proving that the company my father built was mine to lead, not Judith's. As I entered, I noticed the group of people gathered near the entrance, laughing and mingling, most of whom had been in the ballroom the night before, when the accusations flew. Their eyes momentarily locked onto me as I passed, a few of them exchanging furtive glances. I could hear some hushed whispers, but I didn't flinch. This was no longer about their opinions of me. It was about my father's legacy, my right to lead, and showing them all that Judith's manipulation wouldn't stand. I made my way to the stage, my heels clicking against the marble floor, each step more resolute than the last. In the distance, I could see Judith, standing beside Pamela, the two of them talking to a small group of guests. Judith's face immediately shifted as she saw me approach, her confident, triumphant smile faltering. Pamela, who had been quietly nodding along to whatever her mother was saying, looked over at me, her expression unreadable. I didn't stop. I continued toward the center of the room where the microphone stood. The guests, noticing the shift in energy, quieted down. The string quartet paused, the final notes of their song hanging in the air, and the room fell into an eerie silence. All eyes were on me now. The very same people who had once respected me were now waiting to see what I would do. I picked up the microphone, my voice steady but full of purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my gaze sweeping across the room. "I stand here today not just as the daughter of Thomas Carter, but as the rightful CEO of Carter Manufacturing." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by the shuffle of feet, people adjusting in their seats. I noticed Judith's hands tremble slightly as she gripped her champagne flute. Pamela, who had been quietly nodding along to whatever her mother was saying, looked over at me, her expression unreadable. I know there has been some misunderstanding tonight. Some accusations have been made against me. Accusations of theft, of dishonesty. I want to make something absolutely clear. These accusations are false, and I will not stand by as my father's name and my own integrity are dragged through the mud. A murmur rippled through the crowd as I motioned to Bernard, who was standing by my side. With a gesture, he signaled the team of lawyers who had been working with us. They began distributing binders filled with key documents to every table in the room. I watched as people glanced at the pages, their confusion slowly giving way to disbelief. I'm sure many of you are wondering why this is all coming out now. The truth is, this isn't just about a will or a company. It's about trust. It's about ensuring that Carter Manufacturing continues to thrive and grow under the right leadership, not someone who wants to tear it down for personal gain. I could see a few heads nodding now, people slowly starting to understand what was at stake. Judith, meanwhile, was growing increasingly agitated, but I didn't let her distraction deter me. I was in control now. Earlier tonight, I was publicly humiliated. I was called a thief, a manipulator, someone who had no right to lead this company. But what they didn't tell you is that my father, in his final months, trusted me with this company. He believed in me, not because I was his daughter, but because he knew I had the skills and the vision to keep Carter Manufacturing alive and growing. I motioned for Bernard to begin playing the video. The screen behind me flickered to life, and there, on the large projector, appeared my father's image. His face was thin, and the toll of his illness was evident, but his eyes still held the sharpness they had always possessed. The image of my father speaking to the camera was a moment frozen in time, a final testament to his faith in me. "Hi, this is Thomas Carter, and I'm recording this message on March 15th of last year in the presence of my attorney, Bernard Wesley, and Dr. Catherine Wilson. And I'm here to make my wishes clear. I've made the decision to leave the majority stake in Carter Manufacturing to my daughter, Venus." The room went completely silent. Judith stood frozen, her hands shaking, as my father continued to speak about his decision, his faith in me, and his understanding of the future of the business. It was clear. He had planned for this moment. He knew that Judith would contest his wishes, and he had made sure that everything was documented, legally sound, and above reproach. The video continued, showing my father's explanation of why he had entrusted the company to me, even detailing how he had tried to encourage Pamela to take an interest in the business, only for her to reject it time and time again. The video didn't just serve to defend my position, it dismantled the narrative Judith had been trying to create for months. As the video concluded, I faced the crowd once again, this time with a renewed sense of strength. I know many of you have heard stories about me, about how I was never around, about how I don't deserve this company,
But I want to remind you, actions speak louder than words. In the past year, Carter Manufacturing has grown. We've expanded into 2 new markets. We've added jobs. We've kept this company running despite the challenges. I looked directly at Judith and Pamela. You can spread all the lies you want, but the truth is in the numbers, and the numbers don't lie. Judith moved toward me, her face flushed with anger. I knew what she was thinking. This was not the way she had planned for tonight to go. She had wanted to publicly humiliate me, to take the spotlight off of my success, and put the blame on me. But now the situation had turned on her. "Enough of this," she hissed, but her words were drowned out by a voice from the back of the room. "Venus is right," said Gregory Thompson, the CEO of one of our largest clients, standing up from his table. "This is the truth. I've been in business long enough to know when someone's lying to me, and Venus Carter is the one we need leading this company." I watched as other guests started flipping through the binders, reading the documents that had been prepared for them. The evidence was undeniable. Judith's grip on the room was slipping, and for the first time, I could feel the shift. The tide was turning in my favor. "You think this is over," she spat, turning on her heel. But the damage was done. The room had turned against her, and the respect I had earned over the past year was now evident in the
The days that followed my confrontation in the ballroom were filled with a whirlwind of emotions. I was walking on a fine line between vindication and vengeance, the outcome of the battle still uncertain. My father's video, the documentation Bernard and I had gathered, and the unwavering support from my legal team had provided the foundation I needed, but it was far from over. Judith was not one to back down easily, and now that she had lost her public battle, I knew she wouldn't let it go quietly. As the week unfolded, I kept my distance from the media and the local business community. Word had quickly spread about the gala, and most of Omaha's elite had reached out with support, but there were still a few lingering whispers of doubt. A part of me couldn't help but feel the weight of those glances, those soft-spoken words of, "Not everything adds up." But I was no longer the woman I had been just days before. I wasn't afraid anymore, and that made all the difference. By Friday morning, I received the first letter from Judith's attorney. It was a thinly veiled threat, accusing me of slander, attempting to defame her in front of her friends, and demanding that I retract everything I had presented at the gala. The letter ended with a warning. Quote, "Failure to comply will result in legal action." Unquote. I sat back in my chair, my fingers resting on the cold surface of my desk as I reread the words. A sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't the first time Judith had tried to intimidate me. I'd seen this act before, tactical aggression wrapped in legal jargon, but this time it wasn't going to work. She had underestimated me. I wasn't just going to cower and apologize. She wanted to drag me down, but I had spent the last several years proving my worth to this city and this industry. I had earned my place, and there was no way she could take it from me without a fight. I dialed Bernard's number. "Bernard, I received her letter. She's trying to pressure me into retracting the truth. I won't give in, but I need to know how to handle this." "I'm not surprised," Bernard replied, his voice thick with conviction. "We knew this was coming. Don't worry, Venus. This is just a stall tactic. Let's review our next move. I've already arranged for you to meet with a few more key figures who can vouch for your work. I'm going to prepare a formal response, and we'll make sure to back it up with everything we've got." I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Bernard. I'm ready for whatever comes next." That afternoon, I spent hours going through the legal documents with my lawyer, carefully reviewing each line of text and preparing my counterclaim. The more I looked at it, the more I realized that Judith had miscalculated on a fundamental level. She hadn't just attempted to steal my inheritance. She had tried to strip away the legacy my father had built with his own hands, and I was going to ensure that she never succeeded in tarnishing that. By Monday morning, things started to accelerate. I had a meeting scheduled with Jackson Warren, the same man who had supported me at the gala. He was a well-known investor with deep connections in Omaha, and he had been an important ally in my father's vision for Carter Manufacturing. Carter Development was not only a key player in the city's development projects, but Jackson himself was known for his no-nonsense approach to business. I knew that meeting him again would change the tide. He had already seen the documentary evidence we had gathered, but this was about something more than just paperwork. This was about solidifying my position in the industry and ensuring that Carter Manufacturing stayed in the right hands. Venus, good to see you again, Jackson greeted me as I entered his office, his hand firm in mine. I was impressed by your handling of that situation at the gala. I've been following up with a few people, and they've all been incredibly supportive of you. This is your chance to take the company forward. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I smiled at him, feeling a rare sense of relief. I appreciate your support, Jackson. I know it hasn't been easy for you to get involved in all this. I'm ready to take Carter Manufacturing to the next level. My father believed in me, and I'll prove that he made the right choice. Don't worry about Judith. She's a snake, and snakes can only bite so long before they get caught. You're the real deal, Venus, Jackson said, nodding his head in approval. Now, let's talk about the future of the company. We spent the next hour discussing the upcoming projects and how Carter Manufacturing could continue to grow. Jackson suggested a few joint ventures with other development firms, and I laid out my plans for new market expansions. By the end of the meeting, Jackson had agreed to personally back Carter Manufacturing in its new endeavors, even offering a financial boost to secure key contracts. This was the breakthrough I needed. Later that evening, I received a call from Harold Reynolds, the head of the city's planning office. I had known Harold for years, and we'd worked together on several projects. His voice, usually calm and controlled, was laced with concern. Venus, we need to talk about the Riverside project, Harold began. There's been a lot of back and forth with Everline. They're trying to move forward without your approval, and I'm not comfortable with it. I don't think they fully understand the importance of your signature on those permits. I leaned back in my chair, knowing that this was exactly what I needed. I'll handle it, Harold. Don't worry. I will make sure everything is done by the book. The following days were a blur of meetings, emails, and strategizing. I met with my legal team to discuss how best to handle Judith's escalating attacks, and I continued to push forward with Carter Manufacturing's growth plans. Every conversation, every interaction was geared towards proving to the world that I had what it took to run this company. And, just as I had predicted, Judith's tactics began to backfire. As word spread about the legal documents, the video testimony from my father, and the evidence I had gathered, support for my leadership grew exponentially. People began questioning Judith's motives, her ethics, and her ability to lead a company with integrity. On Friday, I received a call from Bernard. I just spoke to Jackson. He's willing to partner with you on a new project, a major one. It's all lined up. They're looking to invest heavily in Carter Manufacturing. And Venus, you're the one they want leading it. My heart swelled with a mix of pride and determination. I was finally being recognized for what I had worked so hard to build. And the best part? Judith's attempts to destroy me only made me stronger. With every false accusation, with every effort to tear me down, I was rising higher. By the end of the week, things had fallen into place. I had secured new contracts, gained more support from the city's leaders, and earned the respect of my peers in the industry. As for Judith and Pamela, they were slowly becoming irrelevant. The more I pushed forward, the more their voices faded into the background. As I sat at my desk that evening, looking over the documents, I realized that this was just the beginning. Carter Manufacturing wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And as for me, I had proved not just to Judith, but to myself that I was capable of running this company. I wasn't just my father's daughter. I was Venus Carter, CEO of Carter Manufacturing. And nothing would stop me now. The days following my confrontation in the ballroom were a whirlwind of decisions, conversations, and cold calculations. For the first time in my life, I felt the full weight of the choices I had made. The weeks leading up to the gala had been filled with doubt and fear, but now there was no turning back. What had begun as an attempt to reclaim my father's legacy had turned into a full-scale battle for the soul of Carter Manufacturing. I spent the following days with Bernard, reviewing every document, every communication, and every piece of evidence that I had gathered over the past year. My father's will was clear. He had entrusted me with the company, and I had to honor that trust, not just for him, but for myself. This wasn't just about money. It was about proving that I was capable of leading this company forward, even in the face of fierce opposition. The Monday after the gala was when the real work began. My phone buzzed relentlessly with calls, most of them from unknown numbers or media outlets asking for comments. The rumors were already starting to spread about Judith's accusations, and people were eager to hear my side. But I knew this wasn't the time to get into a public spat. I needed to control the narrative, and that meant staying focused on the business. At the office, I gathered my team for a meeting. My key staff, the ones who had stood by me through the ups and downs, were looking at me with a mix of concern and admiration. The board members, however, had been noticeably quiet. I knew that some of them had already heard whispers from Judith's camp, and I wasn't sure if I could count on them in this critical moment. I know there's been a lot of speculation this week, I began, standing at the head of the table, but I want you all to understand something. My father's vision for this company was simple. Carter Manufacturing is a legacy of hard work, trust, and integrity. I've worked with each of you to build this company into something my father would have been proud of, and that doesn't change just because someone else wants to claim what isn't theirs. There was a noticeable shift in the room. Eyes that had once been uncertain now began to focus on me. Some of them had worked with my father for decades, and they could see the truth behind the corporate drama. There is no an IV connection, so I'm just going to cut that sentence out. Your loyalty is appreciated, but now it's time for us to take action. We have a business to run, and no matter what happens with the legal challenges, we are going to keep moving forward. I laid out the plans for the upcoming quarter, expansion into 2 new markets, the launch of new product lines, and a major contract that could help solidify our place as one of the leaders in our field. As I spoke, I could see the doubt slowly start to fade from the faces of my team. We had work to do, and they knew I was the one to lead them through it. By the end of the meeting, my core team was solidified. They trusted me, and I trusted them. But there was still the matter of the legal side of things. Bernard had been working tirelessly to counter Judith's accusations, and the timeline for resolving this dispute was rapidly shrinking. We needed to act fast, or the damage to Carter Manufacturing's reputation could be irreversible. The next day, I received a call from Jackson Warren. We had been in touch for months, but now the urgency in his voice made it clear that things were escalating. Venus, I'm hearing that Everline is trying to backpedal on the Riverside project. They're claiming that you don't have the proper regulatory clearance. He said, his voice tight. This is going to affect both our companies if it's not handled quickly. I know, I replied, leaning back in my office chair, trying to stay calm. But they're wrong. The permits have been processed correctly, and everything is in order. I just need to get the truth out there before they start using this as leverage against me. I'm not worried about them, Venus. I'm worried about you. You've got a strong legal team, but this situation is already beginning to affect how other investors are viewing you. We need to ensure this doesn't blow up any further. I'll handle it, I said firmly. I've got a plan in place. I'll get this sorted. After the call ended, I stood up and walked over to the window of my office. The city of Omaha sprawled out beneath me, the skyline filled with potential and opportunity. My father had built this company from the ground up, and I wasn't going to let it be torn apart by lies. I had worked too hard to let that happen. No one was going to steal my birthright, not after everything my father had done to ensure that I was ready for this. As the days passed, I continued to meet with my legal team, reviewing every piece of evidence we had against Judith's claims.
We were preparing a formal response, but there was one piece of the puzzle I hadn't anticipated. Judith was beginning to gather support for her cause. People who had worked with my father and who had never really gotten along with me. They were whispering doubts about my leadership, about my ability to take Carter Manufacturing to the next level. But what they didn't realize was that I was already 5 steps ahead. That evening, I sat at my desk staring at the stacks of paperwork in front of me. My father's legacy, my career, everything I had worked for was on the line. But I wasn't going to back down. I wasn't going to let someone like Judith, who had spent so many years trying to manipulate people, destroy what I had fought for. I picked up my phone and called Bernard. "We're ready," I said, my voice resolute. "It's time to make our move." The next day, we launched our counterattack. We sent out press releases, met with key investors, and provided the public with all the information they needed to see the truth. As I watched the news coverage, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about reclaiming my father's legacy and proving that I was the right person to lead Carter Manufacturing. And as for Judith, she was doing everything she could to hold on to power. But she was no match for the truth.